Good mid-afternoon, everybody, and we are rolling on with combine content. Earlier today, we talked quarterbacks, and I know that's where a lot of the focus is going to be right now for most people, including Seahawks fans, but there were a couple other position groups that went yesterday, and I do want to dive into them just a little bit here. And today, in this video, we are going to be talking about wide receivers. And wide receiver to me is always a really fun group to look at in the draft because you can always find uber talented guys who are going to be available day 2, day 3, even in UDFA just because there are particular circumstances that dictate them not getting drafted high. There wasn't enough production, wasn't a good enough quarterback to put them on display in college. But you look at the guy and you think, you coach him up right, you put him with the right system, the right quarterback, he could be good. So let's take a look at some of the receivers. I'm going to go over a handful of guys who I think impressed me and did well. I'm going to look at a guy who I think had a mixed combine. And then I'm going to look at some guys who I think really kind of hurt their value. And again, we're looking at things through a Seahawks lens. So a lot of these guys are going to be guys that Seahawks fans have already been kind of circling the wagons on in terms of potential draft targets. Okay, this first guy, however, is not a guy who I think very many people were thinking about. He's a Princeton wide receiver, and he actually did the full slate of seasons in college football. It's Andre Yoshivas. So this guy, he's fast. In fact, you can see if you scroll down a little bit, he ran a 4.4 340, and he's big. 6'3", 205 pounds. That is a really good 40-yard dash and 10-yard split for a guy who's 6'3" and 205 pounds. Also explosive. His vertical jump, 39 inches. Broad jump was 10 feet, 8 inches. So this guy is not only big, but he moves well for his size. And that is the thing that really turned my head. His 20-yard shuttle was nice as well. I mean, you're getting a guy who is bringing it's not DK Metcalf, of course. And there are things you can pick at a little bit. Like his hands are kind of small. He doesn't have the greatest hands. That was something that happened in college. It'll probably happen for a little bit in the pros. There are definitely things to pick at. But this guy's a really good athlete. And he's probably a better athlete than you would expect a Princeton receiver who is also 6'3" to be. So Andre Yoshivas is a guy that I think needs to be paid attention to. Quite frankly, as weird as it is to say that I'm coveting a Princeton receiver, this is the kind of guy who might end up being a later round pick that exceeds expectations in the NFL if they find the right situation. All right, so this next guy is somebody that I think most people are familiar with, actually. It's Marvin Mims Jr. from Oklahoma. Oklahoma receivers tend to get a decent amount of attention because they've had a decent amount of success in the NFL lately. So Marvin Mims actually clocked in with pretty decent size, 5'11", 183 pounds. Given what we were expecting from him, that's not too bad, I don't think. And not only is his size okay, but his speed is kind of off the charts here. 4.38 40 time. And he's also explosive. His vertical jump almost hit 40 inches, 39 and a half. His broad jump, 10 feet 9 inches. So he's fast, he's explosive, and he had a great catching session. When he was doing his catching session, he was running really good routes. He caught every ball that was thrown his way. He looked like a very natural receiver. So there's definitely going to be a push in Seattle in the coming years to start thinking about a replacement for Tyler Lockett. I think this guy has, I mean, it's not an exact clone of Tyler Lockett. We'll get to a guy a little bit later who might be the exact Lockett clone, but you can see some of the same traits here. You can see some of the same interesting stuff. He might even be a better athlete. In fact, he probably is a better athlete than Tyler Lockett. So Marvin Mims Jr., I think, made positive progress in his attempt to become a good NFL player. And I got to talk about this guy a little bit as well. Now, I'm not really into the idea of using a first-round pick on a receiver right now, but we're trying to figure out who you could spend that first-round pick on if you're going to do it. And I don't hate it. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be angry sight unseen if we spend a pick on a receiver in, say, our number 20 pick. But who would it be? Right now, it seems like the answer is Jackson Smith, the hyphen from Ohio State. And this guy had a good combine. So credit where credit's due. I've been a little bit down on this guy previously, but Jackson Smith, good combine. Good size. He's 6'1", 196 pounds, so size is not a problem. He had an incredible catching session. He looked the most natural of any receiver out there, I think. He looked great out there. He looked like a very natural catcher of the football. He had one of the greatest shuttles in NFL history, I think, combine history for a receiver, 3.93 seconds, which was better than anyone else in this class by like 0.2 seconds. Granted, not very explosive. His vertical jump and broad jump were both pretty lackluster, but he more than made up for it in other ways. And I think this combine did some positive work for his draft stock. And I'm starting to think that he will end up being the top receiver going in this draft. All right, one more guy who I think turned heads in a positive way is Bryce ford-wheaton of the West Virginia Mountaineers. And this is going to be like Jackson Smith is going to be a first-round pick. Marvin Mims Jr. is going to be a day 2 pick. But a guy like Bryce ford-wheaton and Yoshivas, these are the potential day 3 sleepers. Although maybe not now. Who knows, right? But Bryce ford-wheaton is a guy who didn't produce that much in college and wasn't getting a ton of attention. But this combine should get some attention. This guy is a phenomenal athlete. And let's start with the size here, okay? 6'4", big, tall. He's got the weight to back it up, 221 pounds. Arms are long, 33.5 inches. Hands, decently sized, about 9.5 inches. More than good enough. And look at the speed and explosiveness he brought to the table here. 4.38 40, one of the best 40s in this class. Good 10-yard split as well, by the way. Not an all-time great one, but pretty good. Vertical jump, 41 inches. The dude has hops. Broad jump, 10 feet 9 inches. The dude is an explosive athlete. So I would put this guy up there as an athlete with any receiver you can care to name. This guy, you want to find the next DK Metcalf. This guy, with his incredible athletic prowess, by the way, great 20-yard shuttle as well, could be the next DK Metcalf. Okay, now I'm going to turn the page to a guy that Seahawks fans are very interested in for a few reasons, who had a mixed combine. This guy, Zay Flowers, is a guy that I've really started to gravitate towards lately, and his results from the combine were mixed. Let's try to break it down here, because the thing is, most of his measurables were not that good. Just being honest. He's small, 5'9", 182 pounds. Pretty small. Short arms, 29.25 inches. Hand size, 9.25 inches. So the measurables are not very good. And I can also say that he doesn't seem particularly explosive. When you're this small, you want to be explosive. And his vertical jump was not good, 35.5 inches. Broad jump, 10 feet 7 inches. I mean, it's okay, but it's not what you're looking for when you're talking about a receiver that is small and has size problems. Phrasing. Wow. Okay. The good news is, moving on. The good news is his 40-yard dash was good. 4.42 seconds, which, by the way, this class was kind of slow as far as receivers went. 4.42 was actually one of the best 40-yard dashes for receivers. We actually looked at a couple of the guys who scored better, and he had a great catching session. He looked like a very natural receiver out there. So there you go. That's why I say it's mixed. So I like him, but it wasn't all rainbows and sunshine. Okay, now let's take a look at some of the guys who I think disappointed at the combine, and I'm not going to say turned me against them, but I think harmed their draft stock at least a little bit here. First, we're going to do Jordan Addison. Previously, he was my wide receiver 1. Now I don't know if I can say that. I think that there are at least a couple of guys who have made a good argument to be moved ahead of him. So let's talk about it. Now, I don't want to take anything away from his catching session. He looked like a good receiver catching the ball, and at the end of the day, that is what matters. But he's small, 5'11", which that's okay, but 173 pounds? That is a very, very lean man. That is a very, very slight individual. And his arms, not even 31 inches. Hands, not even 9 inches. These are traits of a receiver that is going to have issues at the next level. So Jordan Addison, not great measurables. And I'm sorry, but 4.49 is not good enough when you're that small. I need you to be closer to 4.4 flat. 4.49, not doing it for me. And also, while we're here, his vertical jump, not even 3 feet. Broad jump, barely broke 10 feet. Not explosive as an athlete. So all he can really hang his hat on is his admittedly good catching session. So his stock is down for me. Another guy whose stock is down for me is Tank Dell, and this is a guy who I've heard a lot about from Seahawks fans. A lot of Seahawks fans are intrigued by him. A lot of Seahawks fans have been talking about him. I don't think this combine did him very many favors. Now, I understand that there are some things about him that aren't necessarily captured in a combine, but he's tiny, man. This dude is... It's almost Tutu Atwell tier, man. It's not quite that bad, but 5'8", 165 pounds... Arms, I mean, the arms are actually a little bit longer than you would expect given that 30 and a half, but his hands are really small, barely 8.5 inches. So he has some real measurable problems. And the athletic stuff is the 40-yard dash, 4.49 seconds. That's not anywhere near good enough for a guy this small. You got to be breaking like 4.4 if you're going to be this small in the NFL, I think. Like what are you at this point? You're not a speedster, but you're this size? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Broad jump, barely 10 feet. The only thing that was really good here was his 10-yard split. And even his catching session, he didn't look that good. He was actually slipping around a little bit. He fell down at least a couple times. Didn't look like a great catching session either. So the only thing you can say about Tank Dell in the positive, I think, would be the 10-yard split was sub 1.5. But at the end of the day, so what? One last guy I'm going to talk about here who I think fell short of expectations, and this is a guy who I've actually had mocked to us on at least one occasion, like this guy, but didn't like his combine, Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed is a guy who should be available in the late rounds, and after this combine, he may be even available after that. The size is okay. I thought this guy might be a little bit smaller, so that's cool. 5'11", 187 pounds, plenty. Arms, 30 and a half. Hands, 9 and an eighth. That's adequate. So, hey, that's nice. But I'm looking at Jaden Reed as possibly being like a return specialist as well. So when I look at his athletic scores and I see, I mean, 4.45 is okay. That's workable. But the athletic scores in terms of his explosiveness, 33 and a half inches on his vertical jump and barely 10 feet on his broad jump. It's not very good. The 10-yard split, 1.57, that tells me his acceleration isn't really there. 20-yard shuttle was meh. I'm not going to get hung up on that, but I see a guy here who just isn't very explosive. And I was hoping Jaden Reed could be like a special teamer. I was looking at him in that context. This tells me that's probably not really going to work that well in the NFL. He's not a good enough... He doesn't have the burst that you're looking for from a guy who's returning kicks and punts. So stock down on Jaden Reed, and his stock was already a little bit low. So that's my take on some of these receivers that went through their drills yesterday. I was high on some of it. I was not so high on some of it. Overall, it's not a great crop of receivers. I did find a handful of guys who surprised me, but a lot of them look slow. It's not like the receiver class of even last year. And all things considered, this is a pretty good draft to not need a receiver that badly. So let me know what you think. Let me know if you think I missed somebody or misevaluated somebody. This combine definitely shook up how I feel about the receivers in this class. In some cases in a negative way, but hey, there were some exceptions there. So see you guys later. We're going to take a look at the tight ends, even though I understand that there isn't a lot of interest around the tight ends in this class from Seahawks fans. I think we can talk about it for a little bit here. All right. Peace out. Go Hawks. See you guys later today.